are times we reach the edge of an opening, a breaking through, and we know the situation calls for something new. There are times we cannot see what's just ahead, but still we know there is a life to be led, a path to follow, and we must go, and we must go. And the ones who've gone before us will show us the way, and the ones who follow after will welcome the new day, and the ones who've gone before us will join in the chorus when we do, when we make it through. There are times the burden's heavier than we can bear, but we hold on, 'cause we know there is a task at hand that must be done. There are times our worries build up and start to shake us, threaten to break us, till we remember it's only struggling through that will remake us, that will remake us. And the ones who've gone before us will show us the way, and the ones who follow after will welcome the new day, and the ones who've gone before us will join in the chorus when we do, when we make it through. There are times it's almost easier to despair, to close our eyes, but when we look around, we see our numbers growing, we're on the rise. There are times we get so tired of waiting any longer, but we know we're building as we grow, we're all getting stronger, we're getting stronger. And the ones who've gone before us will show us the way,
Sojourner Truth, was born a slave in Ulster County, New York. My Dutch master named me Isabella Bonefree. I saw my brothers and sisters sold off, and myself sold with some sheep to a Yankee farmer who beat me for not understanding English. I was sold twice more before I was 12 years old. My master raped me and later married me to an older slave, Thomas, by whom I had 5 children. Although slavery ended by law in New York, this slave owner delayed my emancipation and sold my 5-year-old boy, Peter. I was not freed until 1847. When I left the house of bondage, I left everything behind. I wasn't going to keep nothing of Egypt with me, and so I went to the Lord and asked him to give me a new name. And the Lord gave me Sojourner, because I was to travel up and down the land, showing the people their sins and being a sign unto them. Afterward, I told the Lord I wanted another name, because everybody else had 2 names. And the Lord gave me Truth, because I was to declare the truth to the people. I am above 80 years old. It is about time for me to be going. I have been 40 years a slave and 40 years free, and would be here 40 years more to have equal rights for all. I suppose I am kept here because something remains for me to do. I suppose I am yet to help break the chain. I have done a great deal of work, as much as a man, but did not get so much pay. I used to work in the field and bind grain, keeping up with the cradler, but men doing no more got twice as much pay. We do as much, we eat as much, we want as much. I suppose I am about the only colored woman that goes about to speak for the rights of the colored women. I want to keep the thing stirring now that the ice is cracked.
My name is Charlotte Fortin, and I'm a teacher from Philadelphia, one of 70 teachers who went south to the South Carolina Sea Islands in 1862 to teach as part of the Philadelphia Port Royal Assistance Project. I am the first Black teacher to participate in the experiment of educating ex-slaves. Planters there had fled when Union troops occupied the islands, and we seized the chance to begin educating the slave population that had been left behind. I was assigned to the island of St. Helen. I never before saw children so eager to learn. The older ones during the summer work in the fields from early morning until 11 or 12 o'clock, and then came to school after their hard toil in the hot sun, as bright and as anxious to learn as ever. While I was in St. Helen, I used to spend time in Beaufort at Harriet Tubman's, also known as Moses. She has helped off a large number of slaves after taking her own freedom. She told us that she used to hide them in the woods during the day and go around to get provisions for them. How exciting it was to hear her tell her story.
One night I dreamed I was in slavery. About 1850 was the time. Sorrow was the only sign. Nothing around to ease my mind. Out of the night appeared a lady leading a distant pilgrim band. First mate, she yelled, pointing her hand, "Make room on board for this young woman. Say, get come on up. I got a lifeline. Come on up to this trade of mine. Come on up. I got a lifeline. Come on up to this trade of mine." from town to town, seeking every lost and found, setting those free who once were bound. Somehow my heart was growing weaker. I fell by the wayside, shifting sand. Firmly did this lady stand, where she lifted me up and took my hand, saying, come on up, I got a lifeline. Come on up to this trade of mine. Come on up, I got a lifeline. Come on up to this trade of mine. She said her name was Harriet Tubman. She drove for the Underground Railroad. Who are these children dressed in red? They must be the ones that Moses led. Who are these children dressed in red? They must be the ones that Moses led. She said her name was Harriet Tubman. She drove for the Underground Railroad. Come on up, come on up. Who are these children dressed in red? They must be the ones that Moses led. Who are these children? They must be the ones that Moses led. I got a lifeline.
When the Civil War ended, women teachers, black and white, were the backbone of the Freedoms Bureau, converging on the South from all directions. We taught under the most difficult circumstances. The colored people are far more zealous in the cause of education than whites. They starved themselves and went without clothes in order to send their children to school. A child 6 years old, her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, the latter over 75 years of age, commenced their alphabet together, and each one can read the Bible fluently. Everywhere in the South, white opposition to our work mounted, and we were subjected to personal ridicule and disturbances at the schools. We could not get credit at local stores, could not find rooms to rent, and sometimes had to stand up to violence. Stones were thrown at pupils on their way to and from school. Bricks and missiles were thrown through the windows while schools were in session. A schoolhouse was broken open on successive nights for months. A white teacher was whipped in public, another was run out of town, and several black families were evicted from their homes because they sent their children to school. Schools were burned, and threats of violence to teachers were common. But we knew we had to keep trying. We remembered the words of our sister, Sojourner Truth, when she spoke at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio in 1851.
That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen them most all sold off to slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then that little man in black there, he says women can't have as much rights as men, 'cause Christ wasn't a woman. Where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man had nothing to do with him. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, these women together here ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they are asking to do it The men better let them.
Qué bonita bandera, qué bonita bandera, qué bonita bandera, la bandera puertorriqueña.
My name is Luisa Capetillo. I was born on October 28, 1879, in the town of Arecibo, Puerto Rico. My mother migrated to Arecibo from France, and my father was a migrant from the Basque region of Spain. They were drawn together by their shared belief in the democratic ideals expressed in the revolutionary movements that swept Europe in 1848. To me, education is the mother of freedom, and I thank my mother for allowing me to freely delve into things unhindered by traditions. I started working as a lectura, a reader, in one of Arecibo's tobacco factories. I sat on a raised platform and I began the day with news from local and international papers. I then moved on to socialist and anarchist philosophy novels, all chosen by the workers. This form of workers' education drew me into the emerging labor movement.
I was born in Texas, 1853, a descendant of African, Native American, and Mexican ancestors. After the Civil War, I worked for the Freedmen's Bureau. I have fought against injustices of poverty, racism, capitalism, and the state for my entire life. My name is Lucy Parsons. I was forced to move to Chicago with my husband, Albert, in 1873 because he was a white man. There were laws against intermarriage in the South, and he had been registering black people to vote. In Chicago, I began organizing sewing workers and led thousands of them out on strike on May 2nd, 1886, as part of the nationwide protest for an 8-hour day. My husband was one of the founding members of the Chicago Trades and Labor Assembly. On May 4th, 1886, he spoke at a demonstration in Haymarket Square, sanctioned by the mayor of Chicago, protesting police attacks on the 8-hour day demonstration the day before. After we left the demonstration, a bomb went off, and Albert was eventually imprisoned and hanged, along with 4 other men accused of the bombing. When I begged to see him on his last morning, the police strip-searched me and my children and threw us naked into a jail cell. They let us go once he was dead. A few years later, the governor pardoned everyone else who was charged for the bombing for lack of evidence. I made my living as a dressmaker to support my 2 children and continued speaking out. The Chicago police characterized me as more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. I, along with Mother Jones, was one of the founding members of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, commonly known as the Wobblies.
After the United States took possession of Puerto Rico from the Spanish in 1898, the labor movement grew. In 1905, I helped lead a strike of agricultural workers directed by the Federación Libre de los Trabajadores, Free Federation of Workers, the largest union in Puerto Rico. My conception of women's freedom goes far beyond political rights. It encompasses dress, sexual expression, and abolishing the sexual double standard. I believe that everybody has the right to be clean and clothed, to wear shoes, and to have an education.
Never be deceived that the rich will permit you to vote away their wealth. We, the women of the country, have no ballot even if we wish to use it, and the only way that we can be represented is to take a man to represent us. You men have made such a mess of it in representing us that we have not much confidence in asking you. We are the slaves of slaves. We are exploited more ruthlessly than men. Whenever wages are to be reduced, the capitalist class use women to reduce them. And if there is anything that you men should do in the future, it is to organize the women.
Which side are you on? 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 Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How Well, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
My name is Mary Harris Jones, and I was born during a rebellion in County Cork, Ireland in 1830. My grandfather was hanged for his part in that rebellion. I was nearly 50 when I took up the business of agitating to improve labor conditions. My mind is kept constantly on the alert, coping with difficulties, planning campaigns, organizing workers along new lines, and striving to better working conditions. I have no time to think about getting old. Besides, I have a lot to accomplish yet. I began organizing for the Knights of Labor, and my work brought me out to Colorado, where I first met my boys, the coal miners. They call me Mother, and I call them my boys. And it's true that I've been given most of my time to the miners' union, but I don't belong to any one union. I belong to the workers, wherever they are in slavery, regardless of what their trade or craft may be. Now, a lady is the last thing on earth I want to be called. A lady is a parasitical outgrowth of the system we live under. I call myself a hellraiser. I belong to a class which has been exploited, robbed, and plundered for centuries. And because I belong to that class, I have to go and help break the chains. I remember what happened on September 23, 1913. The strike began and it continued for over 15 months. I was 83 years old then, but fought alongside of the miners, and I was arrested 5 times. What would the coal in the mines be worth if you did not work to take it out? But a miner is cheaper than a mule to a coal company. One brother said he got fair pay, but I just wanted to ask him, what does he call fair pay for a miner? You produce about $10 a day, and you get 1/10 of that, and the other fella gets the balance? You call that a square deal? Don't fear anybody. You create the wealth. So I say, let's go. Let's fight. Let the fight go on. The producers, not the meek, shall inherit the earth. Not today, perhaps, not tomorrow, but over the rim of the years me old eyes can see the coming of another day. Sisters and brothers, pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living.
As we go marching, marching through the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill-lofts gray are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing bread and roses, bread and roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we go marching, marching, we bring the brighter day. The rising of the women means the rising of the human race. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses.
My name is Pauline Newman. I'd like to tell you about the kind of world we lived in over 100 years ago, because all of you probably weren't even born then. That world was a world of incredible exploitation of men, women, and children. I went to work for the Triangle Shirtwaist Company in 1901. The corner of a shop would resemble a kindergarten because we were young, 8, 9, 10 years old. It was a world of greed. The human being didn't mean anything. The hours were from 7:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night when it wasn't busy. When the season was on, we worked until 9 o'clock. No overtime pay, not even supper money. My wages as a youngster were $1.50 for a 7-day week. I know it sounds exaggerated, but it isn't. It's true. If you worked there long enough and you were satisfactory, you got 50 cents a week increase every year. So by the time I left the Triangle Shirtwaist Company in 1909, my wages were up to $5.50, and that was quite a wage in those days.
My name is Rose Schneiderman. I'm a garment worker and have organized garment workers for years. It is my friends and sisters who died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire 2 months ago. We will never forget March 25th, 1911. We will never forget the 146 women and girls who died in a fire because they could not escape the flames. The company had locked the doors to the stairs from the outside to prevent employees stealing or escape. The fire ladders could not reach that high. There were no fire extinguishers, and there was only one fire escape, which would have taken 3 hours to empty the building. I could see smoke pouring from the 8th and 9th floors. That was where Triangle Shirtwaist had its rooms. The faces of young women pressed up against the windows. Hundreds of screaming heads. At one window, a young man helped a girl onto the sill and let her drop, as gently as if he were helping her into a streetcar. And that's when I heard my first thud. He brought another girl to the window. She kissed him. And then he held her in space and dropped her. In a flash, he was out the window himself. The girls had no other way out. The thuds of the falling bodies grew so loud I thought they'd be heard all over the city.
In the heart of New York City, near Washington Square, in 1911, marsh winds were cold and bare. A fire broke out in a building 10 stories high, and 146 young girls in those flames did die.
So tonight we gather at the Metropolitan Opera House to demand a fire prevention bureau, more factory inspectors, and compensation for the families. I would be a traitor to those burned bodies if I came here to talk good fellowship. This is not the first time girls have been burned alive in the city. Each week I must learn of the untimely death of one of my sister workers. Every year thousands of us are maimed. The life of men and women is so cheap and property so sacred. There are so many of us for one job, it matters little if 146 of us are burned to death. We have tried you, citizens, you of the middle and upper classes, and we are trying you now. You have a couple of dollars for the sorrowing mothers and daughters and sisters by way of a charity gift, but every time the workers come out in the only way they know how to protest against conditions which are unbearable, the strong hand of the law is allowed to press down heavily upon us. I can't talk fellowship to you who have gathered here. Too much blood has been spilled. I know from my experience it is up to the working people to save us. The only way we can save ourselves is by a strong working class movement.
There were many conditions the women would not tolerate, and we continued to organize. Now, in 1915, we were not supposed to talk about sexual harassment or sexual orientation. It's supposed to be a secret. But what's the secret? You and I know about it. We've experienced it. We're supposed to be ashamed. I lived for 56 years with my partner, Frida Miller, raising a child together, and both of us fought for women's and workers' rights. I am not ashamed. I am angry and fighting for our rights. My friend Rose Schneiderman told me a story I want to share with you. While she was organizing the Aptheker garment shop, she heard that Mr. Aptheker, the boss, had a habit of pinching the girls whenever he passed them. They, of course, wanted it stopped. Rose went to see him and told him that this business of pinching the girls in the rear was not nice, that the girls resented it, and would he please stop. He was a rather earthy man and looked at Rose in amazement and said, "Why, Miss Schneiderman, these girls are like my children." Rose said, "Mr. Aptheker, we would rather be orphans." And the pinching stopped.
There once was a union maid who never was afraid of the goons and ginks and company finks and deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the union hall when a meeting it was called, and when the company boys came round, she always stood her ground. "Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die." This union maid was wise to the tricks of company spies. She couldn't be fooled by company stools. She always organized. She always got her way. When she struck for higher pay, she'd show her card to the company guard, and this is what she'd say: "Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die. No, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. No, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die."
My name is Emma Taneyuka. I was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1916. My mother was Mexican and my dad was Native American. I lived with my grandparents because my parents had 11 kids. My grandfather, who was a carpenter, read the newspapers with me and took me to rallies for the rights of poor people. When I was 16 years old and a senior in high school, I joined a picket line of cigar rollers who spontaneously walked out on strike against the Fink Cigar Company. I had seen a picture of their boss, Henry William Fink, in the newspaper with his shiny boots up on a table and a caption that said, "These girls better go back to work or they will feel his boot." I got arrested, but I learned one valuable lesson. Never go out on strike without a plan. I found out that I had a talent for organizing, and since I was on the debate team in high school, I was also a good speaker. I participated in a number of strikes and was arrested numerous times. I never thought in terms of fear. I thought in terms of justice.
Hey, Rodney, where you going in the middle of the night? I'm going down to London for the bloody Grunwick strike, where a wee small band of immigrants are fighting for the rights. So put your coat on, Jimmy lad, come and join the fight. Hold the line, hold the line. We'll be there before the dawn to hold the picket line.
The first day I came to England, my impression was not good. I came in October. Leaves were falling down and all the trees were black. My name is Jaya Ben Desai. My family and I were forced out of Tanzania in 1964, and we first went to India before immigrating to England. I started working in the mail department at the Grunwick Film Processing Factory in 1974. Most of the workers were new immigrant Asians like myself, and the atmosphere was one of fear and control by management, who who treated us like children. They forced us to work overtime on demand and to get a permission slip to use the toilet. A coworker said to me that she felt ashamed to ask. I said, "When he has no shame making you ask loudly, why should you feel ashamed?" On August 20th, 2 of my coworkers were sacked. I went to my manager to complain. He likened me and my coworkers to chattering monkeys. I told him, "A person like me, I'm never scared of anybody. What you are running here is not a factory. It is a zoo." But in a zoo, there are many types of animals. Some are monkeys who dance on your fingertips. Others are lions who can bite your head off. We are lions, Mr. Manager. Before the 3 of us walked out, I opened his office door and yelled to my fellow workers, "My friends, listen to this. What is happening to me today will happen to you tomorrow." This man wouldn't speak to white workers the way he speaks to us.
I became an organizer for the National Workers' Alliance, and in 1938, I became the leader of the 12,000 workers, mostly Mexican-American women pecan shellers, who were on strike. Their wages had been cut almost in half. In less than 2 months, 27 days of which I spent in jail, the owners were forced to raise their pay. My outspokenness as a Mexican woman, and because I was a member of the Communist Party, enraged many outside the community of West San Antonio. In 1939, a mob attacked the municipal auditorium where I was speaking. I barely escaped through a secret tunnel. After that, I was blacklisted, unable to get work, and ended up moving to California. I returned to San Antonio in the 1960s to a welcome and recognition I never expected. There were times I thought I would be lynched, but I never thought I'd be honored. Apparently, what started out as an organizing campaign for equal wages turned into a mass movement against starvation and for civil rights and a minimum wage law.
After we walked out, we joined a trade union called APEX, Association of Professional, Executive, Clerical, and Computer Staff, who provided us with support and strike pay. We began demanding that Grunwick rehire us and recognize our right to join a trade union in order to take up any issues the workers may have with the factory owners. Up to that point in time, unions were all led by white men who seldom supported women or non-white workers. But after several months on the picket line, our cause was taken up by the wider trade union movement. The miners came out, car workers came out, engineering workers, and on some days more than 20,000 people packed themselves into the narrow lanes around Grunwick. The postal workers helped us by boycotting services to Grunwick, who depended on them to deliver the processed photos to their customers. The government appointed a commission that made recommendations to Grunwick, but Grunwick refused to honor them. Unfortunately, after 2 years of constant struggle and never before seen solidarity, the Trade Union Congress and Apex decided we couldn't win and backed out. Yes, we were defeated, but because of us, the people who stayed in Grunwick got a much better deal. The factory raised their wages twice in the 2 years we were on strike, and when the factory moved, a van started coming to their homes to pick them up because it was difficult for them to get to the new place. Can you imagine that? And they get a pension today, and that was because of us, because of our struggle.
Her union speech at age 50 ignited a sensation. Girlie was her given name, but not her reputation. She won fame as a firebrand with wisdom to bestow. The world would be a better place if workers ran the show. In New York hotel kitchens and near New England smokestacks, with Minnesota miners and southern lumberjacks, she journeyed round the country without breaks throughout the year, and in Lawrence, Massachusetts, reached the peak of her career.
In 1907, I became a full-time organizer for the Wobblies. My name is Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. The IWW began organizing among immigrant workers, foreign-born workers, many of whom had just come off the boats. In fact, many of these big companies actually imported them. When I was in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1912, I saw posters that had been put up in Montenegro, a small country in southeastern Europe. And these posters showed the workers of Lawrence, Massachusetts, coming out of the mill on one side with bags of money under their arm and going into the bank on the other side. Well, naturally, when you live in the sparse hillsides of Montenegro, that was quite an invitation. They recruited from all over, wherever workers and their families lived in poverty. In the city of Lawrence alone lived 25 different nationalities who spoke 45 different languages, but hardly any English.
The textile mills of Lawrence made the owners' pockets full, but little reached the poor mill hands whose looms produced the wool. The wages were abysmal, families barely stayed alive. Nearly half the deaths in Lawrence were of children under 5.
What precipitated the big strike in 1912, known as the Bread and Roses Strike, which is one of the great historical struggles in our country, was a political act on the part of Massachusetts. The hours of labor were reduced from 56 to 54 hours. That was only for women and children, but it affected something like 75% of the workers in the mills. After the law went into effect, the mill owners sped up the work. The workers waited to see if their wages would be cut as well as their hours. When that first paycheck came, it was short. Wages averaged $8.75 a week at that time. The cut in wages meant the difference between mere subsistence and starvation. And so the melting pot boiled over and workers poured out of the mills. The American Federation of Labor didn't want anything to do with them, so they sent for the IWW.
Opposed by all the instruments of power and persuasion, the militia, press, and clergy, and the state administration, Gurley and her comrades organized the teeming throng, and the strikers held together more than 20,000 strong. Then Gurley planned an exodus of strikers' kids from town to stay with Union families till the mayhem simmered down. Some were beaten with their mothers in a brutal police raid, but most went to other cities and were feted with parades.
A protest and roar went up from one end of the country to the other. The result was a congressional investigation, and the conditions of those workers were so exposed to the whole country that the employers were only too happy to call it a day and bring the strike to a close.
At the tender age of 16, she was tough as powder blasts, a tireless defender of the hurting working class. Her will belied her stature, and she taught the bosses fast that even with a size 6 boot, it's still called kicking ass.
I was born in an area the Iroquois people called the Great Pine Forest. When I was 12 years old, my family moved to Detroit in search of work during the Great Depression. My name is Olga Madar. I loved playing softball and did so every chance I got. When I graduated from high school in 1933, I got a summer job working on a Chrysler assembly line. That line moved so fast, I could never keep up. I had nightmares about it, but I was kept on the job because of my citywide reputation as a terror on the women's softball team. Summer jobs on the line put me through Eastern Michigan University, where I graduated in 1938 with a degree in physical education. In 1941, I got a job paying more than my teacher's salary at the Ford Willow Run bomber plant and joined UAW Local 50. I organized our first community recreation programs, and in 1947, I was appointed director of the International Union's Recreation Department, where I fought and won the battle to integrate organized bowling leagues. In 1966, I was elected to the UAW International Executive Board as a member at large, the first woman to hold such an office. 4 years later, I was elected to the first of 2 terms as International Vice President. Again, the first woman to achieve such a leadership position within the UAW. When I retired from the UAW, I continued to work to eliminate discrimination against women and minorities in the workplace and in the community, pushing for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment and for gender equity in the workplace. I helped form CLUE, the Coalition of Labor Union Women, and elected national president at our founding convention in March of 1974. We adopted 4 goals: organize the unorganized, promote affirmative action, get more women to participate in their union, and increase women's presence in political activities. I could never have done all of this without my sisters, Myra Wolfgang, Addie Wyatt, Joyce Miller, and Gloria Johnson. There's still work to be done, but I believe the women coming up after me are up to the task.
Rebecca Lolo Soli took the hand of a frightened teenage girl who was being forced to wed, and 3 times her age. You are a small girl, come sit here next to me. I will tell you about Georgia underneath the shade. She said, this is a patch of Africa where women rule. This is our own village. No one treats you cruel. Here our rights are sacred. When you walk through our door, you won't have to put up with their nonsense anymore.
I was born in a village at Wamba Samburu district in Kenya. My name is Rebecca Lolisoli. British soldiers trained in our area at Archer's Post in Samburu. When our village women collected firewood, the soldiers would jump out and they would rape them, laughing like it was a game. The village men felt shamed and made their wives leave, taking the children with them. They left with nothing. We formed a village so we could protect one another. The problem is Samburu women have no rights, no right to own livestock or land, to go to school, even to choose a husband. If a Samburu man kills his wife, no one cares. He paid the dowry, so he owns her. We actually are bringing a case against the British military for the rapes of over 1,400 Samburu women. 22 years ago, we established the village of Umoja, which means unity in Swahili, on an unwanted field of dry grasslands. Our objectives, just to name a few, were to improve the livelihoods of women and counter the problem of women being abandoned by their families. We also rescue and rehabilitate young girls who run away from or are thrown out by their parents due to early pregnancies or are escaping forced marriage. We survive by selling our beadwork to tourists, and we market our village as a tourist attraction. We have been able to establish a school for the children of Umoja and surrounding villages. I am proud to say that I contributed towards the betterment of other people's lives.
This is a song I sing in honor of the women who would change the status quo. On every continent, you'll find them sharing what they know. When women remain silent, no one thinks that they have anything to say. Rebecca, Lola, Soli, and others show us another way. This is a patch of Africa where women rule. This is our own village. No one treats you cruel. Here our rights are sacred. When you walk through our door, you won't have to put up with their nonsense anymore. Oh yeah, yeah. This is a patch of Africa where women rule. Oh yeah. This is our own village. No one treats you. Here our rights are sacred. Oh, when you walk through our door, you won't have to put up with their nonsense anymore. Cheeky woman, troublemaking lady. Oh yeah, yeah. Cheeky woman. Oh yeah. Troublemaking lady.
I was raised by a powerful woman. She taught me about indigenous communities and look out for the underprivileged Lencas of the region, who often lack access to education and were subject to pervasive racism. My name is Berta Cáceres. In 1993, I founded the Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras, COPIN, to walk alongside people struggling for emancipation, to protect our waters, the rivers, our shared resources in general, as well as our rights as a people. The Hualcarque River has called upon us, as have other gravely threatened rivers. We must answer their call. Our Mother Earth, militarized, fenced in, poisoned, a place where basic rights are systematically violated, demands that we take action. Let us build societies that are able to coexist in a dignified and just way, in a way that protects life. Let us wake up. Let us wake up, humankind. Despertémonos. We are out of time.
Sacred is the balance between all living things. It's what Berta tells us, and the river sings. Water carries her spirit, each drop brings her rebirth. Madre de los ríos, guardian of the earth. Our people come from water, we come from earth and corn. This the river whispers to every new life born. Our wise ones walk beside us, so we will not forget. The land does not belong to us, we were born of it. Despertemos, despertemos, humanidad. Spirits of the young girls teach us to protect the waters of our people with love and deep respect. We hold hands with the river, we hold hands with the land. The bonds cannot be broken by machine or man. Despertemos, despertemos, humanidad. Despertemos, despertemos, humanidad. They tried to take our lifeline and gave us all no say, but you rallied our voices to keep them away. To keep them away. We carry on your struggle, your vision is not lost. You who paid most dearly, resistance has its cost. Water carries your spirit, each drop brings your rebirth. Madre de los ríos, guardian of the earth. Madre de los ríos, guardian of the earth. Despertemos, despertemos, humanidad.
My name is Ai-jen Poo. I've been honored to organize immigrant women workers in New York since 1996. I helped start Domestic Workers United, an organization of women who work in other people's homes as nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers. These are the women whose work makes others' work possible. They started coming together in church basements and community centers to share their stories and to give each other support in their struggle to earn better wages, to learn how to communicate with their employers, and to assert their right to a basic dignity on the job. Domestic Workers United helped to organize the first national meeting of domestic workers. Most of the women at that convention were immigrant women of color. We translated the proceedings into 7 different languages and came up with a list of what we felt we needed to give us the dignity we deserve. We formed the Domestic Workers Alliance, and in April 2010, I became the director. We are an alliance of 35 local organizations in 11 states and 19 cities, advocating for protection, recognition, and respect for the 2.5 million domestic workers in the U.S. We had a major victory in the state of New York in 2010 when we built a powerful coalition and won passage of the first Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights.
De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajaritos que vienen de fuera. De colores es el arco iris que vemos lucir, y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Canto el gallo con el kiri, 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 kiri. La gallina con el cara, 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 cara. Los polluelos con el pío, 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 pío. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores de muchos colores me gustan a mí.
When I began organizing, I already had 6 children and was pregnant. My name is Dolores Huerta. I had a lot of doubts to begin with, but I had to act in spite of my conflict between my family and my commitment. My biggest problem was not to feel guilty about it. I don't anymore, but then everybody used to lay these guilt trips on me about what a bad mother I was, neglecting my children. My own relatives were the hardest, especially when my kids were small. You know, I had 6 and 1 on the way when I started, and I was driving around Stockton with all these little babies in the car with different diaper changes for each one. Of course, I've been afraid of everything until I did it. I started out every time not knowing what I was to do and scared to death. When Caesar first sent me to New York on the boycott, it was the first time we'd done anything like that. There were no ground rules. I thought 11 million people in New York, and I have to persuade them to stop buying grapes? Well, I didn't do it alone. When you need people, they come. You find a way. It gets easier all the time.
The domestic work industry is a microcosm of the triumphs and failures of our society as a whole. Everyone relies on domestic work in one way or another, yet it is too often erased from our consciousness and denied respect and legal protection. Poverty-level wages, grueling hours, and a lack of benefits, training, and advancement opportunities mean that turnover is constant. Yet, just like the farm workers, domestic workers have been excluded from collective bargaining and labor rights. In our campaigns, we work for a society and an economy where everyone's human dignity is recognized and everyone's work valued. I hope to see the contributions of domestic workers acknowledged and the protection of our national and state labor laws extended, not just to domestic workers, but to all excluded workers groups. My mother and my grandmother were strong, wise women, and I believe that if we could just see the world through the eyes of women, we'd have a much clearer picture, both of the problems of our society and the solutions.
Every single day we sit down to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And at our table, we have food that was planted, picked, or harvested by a farm worker. Why is it that the people who do the most sacred work in our nation are the most oppressed, the most exploited? The great social justice changes in our country have happened when people came together, organized, and took direct action. It is this right that sustains and nurtures our democracy today. The civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's movement, and the equality movement for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, they're all manifestations of these rights. Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person, a potential activist. Every minute, a chance to change the world. We, as women, should shine light on our accomplishments and not feel egotistical when we do. It's a way to let the world know that we, as women, can accomplish great things. We must use our lives to make the world a better place to live, not just to acquire things. That is what we are put on this earth for.
We have plowed and we have planted, we have gathered into barns, done the same work as the men, with babies in our arms. But you won't find our stories in most history books you read. We were there, we're still here, fighting for the things we need. We were there in the factories, we were there in the mills, we were there in the mines, and came home to fix the meals. We were there on the picket line, we raised our voices loud. It makes me proud just knowing we were there. From the textile mills in Lawrence to the sweatshops in New York, from the fields in California where our children had to work, we fought to make a living. Bread and roses was our cry. Though they jailed and beat our bodies, our spirit never died. We were there in the factory, we were there in the mills, we were there in the mines, and came home to fix the meals. We were there on the picket line, we raised our voices loud. It makes me proud just knowing we were there. We were Polish, we were Irish, we were African and Jew, Italian and Latina, Chinese and Russian too. They tried to use our differences to split us all apart, but the pain we felt together touched the bottom of our heart. We were there in the factories, we were there in the mills, we were there in the mines, and came home to fix the meals. We were there on the picket line, we raised our voices loud. It makes me proud just knowing we were there. We are teachers, we are doctors, we are cooks and engineers, letter carriers, truck drivers,